Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn, and I run the various services around medcomsnetworking.com. Those are information services, resources, activities for the global medcoms community, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, and medical publishing, and indeed services for people who would like to join that business. If you look at First Medcom's job, you'll find lots of information there for people who are interested to know what we get up to. So today we're running a webinar. I'm absolutely delighted that Jane Packham is with us. We've had a new code of practice in the UK from the ABPI, and I've asked Jane to come along and talk to us about what are the highlights from that code that are particularly relevant to the medcoms community. What we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation from Jane, and then we're going to have a Q&A afterwards. So those of you in the audience today, and there's a lot of you, please just send your questions, comments and observations in, and we'll weave that into the discussion. So thank you very much, Jane. Without further ado, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, sure. Just give me a quick nod when you can see that first slide through. Perfect, great. Well, Peter, thank you so much. I am really delighted to be invited back again to talk to the Medcoms Networking Group. Just to date stamp this session, here we are on the 24th of February. And yeah, I'm going to be having a look at the 2021 code and giving you a bit of an update as to where are we with this, this document. So, a little bit about me just to start off with. My background is very much within the pharmaceutical industry, worked in sales, medical information, sort of compliance, and I now work as very much a code of practice trainer, specializing in the UK ABPI code, but some of the European codes as well. So please get in touch, if I can help you in any way in the future. But look, if you are listening to this session, and particularly when this recording is done, I just want to make three really important points. I'm just going to highlight just the key confirmed changes. I'm not going to cover everything. There's all sorts of little bits of words and phrases that have changed. I'm not going to go into that level of detail. So it's a top line summary. And of course, I'm going to refer you to some really important documentation. But of course, before you make any business decisions, changing anything, then always go back to the full information, and make those decisions. And then finally, those of you that are then tuning into the video, is all that I would say is just make sure you always refer to the latest version of the code. And I explain a little bit more about this because it's still a bit of a moving beast. And we're still waiting for some confirmed text within the code. So what do I mean by that? Well, this is where we are on our code journey. We're doing really, really well. We're progressing. We've done that consultation, the review, and in the middle of January, we had released a new code. So it's been a really, really busy time for me, and I know a lot of you scrutinizing it. So we've now got this new code, but just be aware that this is almost a technical release version of the code. So just about all the information is there. We've still got the same timescale that everything is to come into force by the 1st of July. But there is also a bit of a transition period for things called MEGS, medical and educational goods and services. But otherwise, everything needs to be in place and updated by the 1st of July of this year. So we've still got time, but don't leave it too late to start assessing the changes, is what I would say. So I would basically say that the code, well, it's almost here, okay? So we've got this technical release. It is paining me totally that I don't know what color the code cover is. It's not there displayed in this PDF document, so I'll, watch out for that one. And we'll still have to have a bit of a wager as to what color we think it might be. But in this technical release, if you want to find out more information, then go onto the PMCPA website and you'll see there a number of different supporting documents. It's there under a section called 2021 code. And you'll see there that you've got a clean copy of the code. You've also got a track change version. And I just want to flag to you that whilst that sounds, perfect, a nice track change document, that is only tracking the changes since the consultation went in. So we have no completely comprehensive document which summarizes or just indicates every single nuance that has changed going from the 2019 code across to this new 2021 code. But if you're looking for a bit more detail, then the PMCPA have written an excellent guide. It summarizes again the key changes. They've got a slide deck there as well, and then some extra sort of disclosure templates for transfer of value. Now, at the moment, the PMCPA have said that they're going to be giving more briefings, more information to help you and your clients implement all this. So do watch this space and just refer back, to that page on the website and keep an eye on it. And we'll see what color it's going to be. So I think in terms of, you looking at that technical release, another 5 pointers for you, saying that, we're not completely there yet. So there are still some placeholders in there. We are still waiting for some definitive guidance from the MHRA. And so this needs to be incorporated into the final version of the code. And just be aware that the page numbers in that track change version are not actually correct. So don't get fooled by those if you're trying to cross-refer. And at the moment, what we've got the body of the clauses, and then they put all the clause information together. And then at the end of the clause section, you will then see the supplementary information. But to reassure you that that will actually be integrated in, so you'll have the clause, then the supplementary information in the current format that we're used to. So that is going to help, I think, get that information closer together and to make it a bit easier to understand. And then just to flag that we're still waiting for, a couple of really important things to have some further information on. The book, the code, has all the clauses at the beginning, but then at the end, it's got the constitution and procedure. Now, I don't think if you're in an agency, you need to worry about this too much. This is far more aimed at pharmaceutical companies as to how complaints are made, what's the procedure. But again, just to have on your radar for completeness, that we still need to consult on this, still needs to be updated. And at the moment, I don't know what timing that is going to be and whether it's going to make this 1st of July release. We're still waiting for guidance on that. And then right at the very back of the code, there is a guidelines section. And again, that needs to be updated. So, that's why we've got this concept of this technical release. So it's quite an unusual one. We don't normally have this. But let me tell you, what are those key changes? So with the structure, we've got a massively different structure, and I will just talk you through that. And virtually every clause is being renumbered. The scope is a little bit broader. The scope also talks about ABPI principles, and they're really upping that you need to embed these into your organizations. Partnerships, I'll cover various aspects there. Transfer of value, yes, it's been confirmed that clients are going to need to disclose more, particularly contracted services to public, which could be with members of the public, patients and journalists. And then I'm going to finish with just a little comment about Brexit as to where we are lying with that and the impact on particularly promotional materials and things to watch out there. But I think the big changes, are around the partnerships. And the one that I would just encourage you to embrace is just align all your language with the new terms in the code. I think it makes it a lot easier that instead of talking about consultancy services, even though we might know that that means, getting somebody to chair a meeting, be a speaker, write something on our behalves, just switch that term to contracted services. And then there's just no doubt as to which section of the code you are talking to. And it just removes that element of scope for confusion. So look, here is the new structure of the code. So there is no real change from the consultation on this one. We're still left with the glorious multicolored rainbow going on here. And again, in terms of unpicking this, my tip would be for you to think about whatever activity, whatever material you're doing, just think, what's the intended audience? And then that will then help you to go, right, if we are doing something which is just for healthcare professionals, I would need to look at the blue section. But never forget that we've got this grey section of overarching requirements. So everything in that grey section must apply to everything in the blue, the green section. So make sure that you are really confident on that grey section. And then I just want to flag this idea about the ABPI principles, because this is something during the consultation which has really been strengthened in the new code. And I believe what they're trying to do, and this is stemming from the international codes and the European codes, is really trying to encourage an ethos shift amongst companies and clients. So no longer is it just about the rules. They're encouraging us far more to look at the underlying principles of the code. And within the UK, they've picked on these 4 big principles. Firstly, making sure that, everything we do has got a patient focus, remembering we're thinking about patient safety and that we're complying with laws and regulations. So the big one, of course, is not advertising a prescription medicine to the public. We've then got to think about integrity. So everything that you do, and this is, of course, not just pharma companies, this is all the third parties as well. You're being professional, you're being responsible, ethical, transparent in everything that comes out from the joint collaborations. Transparency links very much with transfer of value, clinical trials, not disguising promotion. So an element of openness. And then finally, of course, just respecting all the stakeholders that we work with and all those different interactions. So the PMCPA and the code is now saying that you've got to, embed and implement those into your organizations. So I would see that through your policies, through your training, to make sure that everybody understands that, and making sure that you can wholeheartedly say that, yep, we have done that as a comment. Be aware as well that the scope has broadened. So this was proposed and this has gone through. We've got clause 2. I fondly call it my naughty clause, where we don't want to bring the industry into disrepute. And the wording was always, it was activities and materials associated with promotion that could bring you into clause 2. There are some other caveats there in the supplementary information, but it was always that wording associated with promotion. This has now been removed. And I think it just strengthens that real underlying principle that everything that you do, whether it's promotional or whether it's non-promotional, must have high standards. And I do wonder if moving forward, there may be more breaches of clause 2 coming through for activities and materials which have been non-promotional ending up as a breach of this code. So just keep those principles across everything and you won't hopefully go too far wrong. Now then, a lot of you tuning in are from agencies, your contracted third parties to companies. And we've always had this underlying principle that companies are responsible for everything you do. And just to flag that this is now very much part of the code itself. It's been brought into a couple of clauses there, and they've added a few extra examples as to who those third parties may be that fall under scope of their clients. I've got some there in pink for you, the new ones. So look, media buyers, providers of services related to events, public relations services. So just have no doubt that if you're working as a third party, you're totally bound by this code if your client follows it. And again, any information that you might put out in response to a client's products, again, that comes in scope of the code. And the big one, I think without doubt, is social media. Not going to talk about that one, but gosh, have that on your radar is what I would say. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dive into a few specifics, just update you. We've got this whole concept of working with others. It's the phrase that I use. And we've got these 5 different things going on. So again, these were in the proposals, they've come through and they've gone live into the final one. But I just want to pick on 3 of those, the idea about donations and grants, collaborative working and contracted services. Because the term medical educational goods and services, so MEGS, has now disappeared. But the principles of that concept have been incorporated into that donations and grants clause. So let me just, talk you through, these three key areas where I think some of your work, may be falling under these new terms. So if we talk about donations and grants, now, a donation, this could be something as a service. It could be a benefit in kind. It could be something like, writing an article in an independent journal. The scope of the donation and grant has broadened, and that there was the definition in 2019. This is now what we're saying in 2021. So it's talking about supporting healthcare, scientific research, or education. That's an important one to have on your radar. But if you're going to be involved in this sort of donation sort of route, then a key thing is that there is no requirement from the recipient to give anything back in return. So this is not a sort of a shared two-way process. It's more of a one-way route. And what they've added into the actual code is that they've just strengthened that any donation and grant must have a certified and a written agreement in place before the donation or the grant takes place. So as a bit of a summary, it's there for donations to healthcare organisations. Patient organisations has been added in here, just to clarify. This is not about individuals, and a few other pointers there. And they've added in again a few little pointers about offering or requesting donations and grants and the role in reps in doing this. So just refer back to the full code is what I would say on that one there. But remember, everything has got to be certified. Now, if we just look at the collaborative working, if any of you are ever involved in this area, then again, there's the old definition. And now they've added in a different level. And now it's switched from the term joint working. This was a really specific phrase from the Department of Health. And we're now saying that, yes, this can in fact enhance patient care in what you're doing, or benefit patients. But there is now a broader term, an option as well, that this might just be benefiting the NHS or as a minimum maintaining patient care. So I think that this is potentially giving more scope for these collaborative projects. And again, you've got to think about certification for some materials. And if you are ever writing educational materials for public and patients for this sort of activity, then again, they've added in that those materials also must be certified. So that might be things that you're involved in writing as well. And on top, they've just given a few timescales as to what they think is a reasonable time to be publishing the outcomes of collaborative working. And they're saying that all parties involved in this should be publishing this. So again, if that's applicable, then just check the detail there within this particular clause going on. So that we've got one transition period. So if you are ever involved in any activities with MEGS, the thing that you need to unpick with your clients as to how do they fit in under the new code? Are they now going to be a donation? Are they more appropriately as a collaborative working? And what you need to do is assess each of those. And if you've got an activity which is going to continue past the end of this year, this is where you need to assess it, look at your contracts, all your paperwork, and bring it in line with the new code. But they're saying you've got that 6-month transition where you don't need to reclassify anything from the 1st of July to the end of the year, if that's the end point. So there's no mega rush pressure, just start assessing those and planning ahead and getting all your paperwork in order if they push into 2022. Final bit to go through, consultancy services. Again, what we've got here is, again, a broader scope. They've just added in more examples of who you may be contracting with. So it may be with patient organisations, and of course it may be the public. And for a lot of you, be aware, as a new example that added in there, that writing articles or publications Yes, that is absolutely a service that would fall under this consultancy or new contracted services, agreement. So I'm hoping there's not really a massive surprise there, but again, just check that you've got everything covered. And the one big thing just to flag is that because we have to disclose consultancy services, or should I say contracted services, because they can now be with members of the public, which could include patients or journalists, this is now bringing in an extra level of disclosure requirements. So companies will now need to disclose any transfer of value payments which have been made to the public. So that includes actual patients and journalists. So they disclose any payments which have been made in 2022, and they will disclose that annually as an ongoing basis. So watch out for that and just make sure that you've got, steps in place if you are there as a third party. So industry is paying you, and then you pay, these public, then those also have got to be disclosed if that is a UK based transaction. One final thing, and then I'm absolutely going to stop and things. We just have one extra legislation change. Actually, I lie. There are two legislation changes. One's around COVID-19. Not going to worry about that one. I just want to put on your radar this one about Brexit. So we now find ourselves in the UK in a really, really complicated situation about licensed medicines. So it's more about the promotional activities, but if you are ever working with a client which has got a centrally approved medicine, so a legacy centrally approved medicine from the EMA, be aware that that will have switched its license. And in Great Britain, so by that, I'm talking Scotland, England, and Wales, that has automatically switched across to a PLGB license, so a product license for GB. But in Northern Ireland, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, that will continue to be under the EU centrally approved EMA license. So this is going to add an extra level of complexity. In a nutshell, it's going to impact prescribing information because product license numbers are going to change. And if you're wondering about transition, go and have a look at the PMCPA website because they issued some guidance on the 16th of February. But I think just have on your radar that going forward, we may well end up in a situation where for these centrally approved medicines, and actually new products coming through, we will have different licenses for GB and we will have different licenses for Northern Ireland. So going forward, we could have a UK-wide license, we could have a GB-wide license, and we might end up with a Northern Ireland sort of wide license. So this is going to impact prescribing information. It's also going to impact promotional materials, and you need to make it clear as to who the audience is going to be. So a real challenge ahead is what I would say. So look, final slide before I stop. Few final key points. So first of all, absolutely scrutinize the detail. This is just a top line summary. Start planning ahead, start discussing, materials and activities that you're doing with clients and, unpick as to what impacts it's going to have. Look at any processes, align that terminology. I think that is so important. And of course, don't forget training. Make sure that people are trained on the changes, refresher if you need it, and don't forget those ABPI principles and get those embedded into your organization. Look at that collaboration side, check that in particular. And if you're involved in those, contracted services with the public, then again, talk to your clients and think about how you're going to capture, track, and help them to disclose any payments. So there we go. That is a quick run through. I'm going to stop sharing there. So yeah, Peter, I know you've been looking at questions and chat comments. So let me hand back to you, I think.
Great, thank you very much, Jane. That was very comprehensive as always. So to those of you in the audience today, please again, let me just remind you, you have at the bottom of your screen got a chat button and a Q&A button, which call up text boxes. So please, observations, comments, questions, send them to us and we'll weave that into the discussion, okay? And we've got quite a few coming in already. Just keep them coming basically, and we'll see where we end up. A couple of questions come in about the slides, access to the information. So this is just an opportunity for me, I guess, to sort of say, all being well, and there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. These webinars are recorded, they're put on Network Pharma TV, you'll find loads of videos there, but this one should be up, all being well, by tonight, basically. So don't worry about that. You can certainly access the information afterwards. Right, I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions and then we'll see whether we can pick up on some of these ones. But I wanted to ask a couple of things. In fact, I wrote several things down and I'm now going to get a bit confused as to what I wanted to ask. Just a stupid question, or stupid point, I suppose. You mentioned the color of the PDF and so on. Just out of interest, is there this is probably a very stupid question, is there a requirement to print that? Print the code of practice, or might it just be left as an electronic document?
I don't believe that there is a requirement to print it. The PMCPA historically always printed it.
Yeah.
So when it does come out, you know, you can, what's always happened is you can contact them and they will send people hard copies free of charge. Yeah. I know a lot of people love to have a hard copy of the code, and I have to say I'm one of those, because I put my post-it notes and I write my little notes and highlight things. Some people just love the, you know, there's always a PDF there as well if you wish to print that.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was I just wondered if there's some sort of legal requirement that it had to be printed. It was sort of very obvious that the first thing you notice, some of us notice, is there's no cover, which gets them away from the whole traditional question of what colour are you going to be this year. And of course, it avoids clashing with the multicolour approach that they're taking. But the other point that I thought also was when I looked at the clean PDF, was my first thought was, goodness, this isn't even very clear, but what they're doing is they're highlighting all the changes, aren't they, with the clause numbers and things are all highlighted in yellow in it. So when I first looked at the clean PDF, I just went, oh god, there's yellow highlights all over the place, sort of thing. Yes. So yes. Apart from anything else, it just does reaffirm what you said, which is that there's a whole completely restructuring this thing, and some people like yourself are going to have to sit down and relearn all the numbers and that sort of thing. So there's going to be confusion out there from that point of view, isn't there?
Yeah, so even that clean version, just to stress, is still a technical version, and you're right.
Yeah, you said, yeah.
Highlighting, is the current 2019 clause numbers. So they're just leaving that in at the moment to enable people to, learn to re-navigate. And just as you say, yes, the changes in the clause numbers are a little painful, but we'll get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's sort of traditionally that, I mean, some people have I think with the code of practice, you can take a view, well, it's important to know what the changes are, but it's relatively following the same pattern. Whereas this one does strike me as being completely turned upside down and inside out, which means people should take maybe a bit more notice of it, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. And from a training point of view, and I appreciate that you obviously offer training, so let's just acknowledge that. But what sort of training does the ABPI offer? Or are they intending to offer, or is it basically the interactive stuff that's on the website? Is there much coming from the ABPI in terms of how to use this?
Yeah, so the training sort of, would normally come from the PMCPA.
That's right, PMCPA.
Yeah, and so that's normally what we would have if it wasn't in this COVID-19 world is that, you know, they would be running their sort of day training courses. They don't normally run specific courses on the changes to the codes when new releases come through, but they normally do give a bit of a document as to, you know, these are the reasons why we've changed it in a little bit more detail. But because of the scope of the changes, say we've got those slide decks, which are definitely worth having a look, and there's some really good guidance documents in there. But to say at the moment, we don't have a definitive document from them at the moment, which says, right, this is the true nitty gritty. And so it is rather like sad people like me that is sat there and almost doing a complete, you know, cross check as to, right, that word has changed. Does that mean anything? Or is it, you know, is it just a nuance and trying to unpick the implications? It's not for the faint-hearted this time, I have to say.
Okay, and that's an important message to get out there. Let's just go back. I should have started. Maybe I should have started with this, and it's sort of going over some old ground. But there'll be people watching this who won't be as familiar as others with this. So just briefly, just paint the picture. We've been talking about ABPI code of practice, PMCPA. Just cover off the how does this fit with FPA code, and the international code and so on. And just give us a little bit of a top line as to how the codes fit together, why the actually why the UK code of practice is so important also, because it is regarded as a bit of a gold standard. But how do they fit together? Can you just address that briefly? Yeah.
Yeah. So think about a cascade is the way I describe it. We've got at the top level, we've got an international code, and this is pharma companies getting together on an international basis. It's also the likes of the PMCPA who manage the codes also getting together again on a global basis and coming up with top line principles. Everything in that international code then has to be cascaded into a European code. I'll keep it European. So that is the FPA code. And then all the countries within Europe then have to adopt those principles into their national country code. So the national country codes overlap hugely, but you'll get differences in terms of local legislation, local history, local things going on. But that's how it sort of fits together in a nutshell.
Okay, and so to pick up on a question that's come in, is there a possibility the ABPI code will not be the one to follow, but the FPA code to follow? The point is that at a national level, we have to have the ABPI code, and there are other national codes in the other European countries, and they fit under that cascade type idea under the FPI code. But then that leads into the question, which and again, I mean, the good examples used to be a congress where you all gathered together in Milan or London or something. How do the different codes all clash with each other? Do you want to just say a few words about that? That sort
Yeah,
of
so when you're working on European global campaigns, it is really challenging to know which code do you pick. And what I find, it's almost down to client preference. Some companies will say, right, we are just going to go with the fairly sort of broad top line FPA principles, but the FPA code lacks sort of serious detail. If we think about the old clause 7, information claims and comparisons, in the UK code, we have lots of really good examples saying, be really careful with suppressed zeros and footnotes, but you just don't get that type of detail into the FPA code. So for that reason, some companies working on global or even European materials will go, we are going to work with the UK code as our benchmark, but it's up to each client to decide, will each pharma company decide what code are they going to pick, or are they just going to take a hybrid and look at the difference and put that into the pot to try and future-proof it across lots of different countries when it gets out there? Because of course they have to certify it on a national level when the material gets out.
Yeah, and it can. Let's just touch on it, and let's just say the obvious. In the good old days, as it were, maybe the new days, at some point, you'd have somebody from one country or a state in the US turning up. You can have a cup of coffee, you can't have a cup of coffee, sort of thing going on. Yes. Yeah, and I think all we need to just address or acknowledge in this sort of environment is that those complexities exist, and people should understand that it can get complicated.
Yes, and with the virtual meetings, don't forget that there is a guidance document from IFPMA, FPA, and also the US Pharma. They've come up with a guidance document for virtual meetings as a result of COVID-19. So if you've not seen that, go and have a look at it on the IFPMA website, because it does give some pragmatic tips about trying to manage a virtual world. So I encourage you to just go and have a glance at that. Yes.
Excellent, and because that covers off one of the questions I was just about to come to. So that starts to cover it off. Within the ABPI code of practice, new code of practice, do they talk about virtual meetings? Do they address it at all?
It's mentioned as a throwaway option as a type of meeting, but no, we've got no detail as to do's and don'ts of virtual meetings. So the best you can do is to, of course, take the broad principles of the ABPI code, go back to those first underlying principles, and then have a look at that guidance from the IFPMA.
Okay. And no suggestion that there's anything else coming?
There is a lot of comments that I hear from pharma companies and agencies who are trying to organize these meetings saying, please, can we have some more guidance? I've not seen anything yet come out from the PMCPA. It's likely to come out either as a guidance document or maybe a Q&A. So all I can say is watch this space, but nothing that I've seen as of yet. But I know companies are saying, please, we need to know how to manage it.
I'm sure. I mean, and to be honest, speaking to someone who's been banging the digital drum for 20 years or something, I mean, it seems like it's just the same old story all the time. We've all been wanting more social media guidance or more digital, you know, and it's sort of a bit under discussion sort of thing. And it still strikes me that they could do more to give us some more clarification. There's a couple of questions coming in here. Let's just try. Can you mention one specific social media promotional caveat to watch out for? Do you want to take something specific at that? Have you got anything in your head?
Again, one specific social media.
Something to watch out for. So I guess what she's looking for is, you know, what's a typical trap you can fall into there?
Yeah, I think I'll give you two. One is promotion to the public. And the big thing that we're seeing at the moment is where pharma company employees or even third parties working on behalf of agencies think that they can just share, like, or comment on posts. And so that is then seen as proactive dissemination of information. That's it in a real nutshell.
But let's pursue that one for a minute, because there's some real traps that you can fall into there, aren't there? You know, so and you know, I guess, well, allied to that, I was going to ask a specific question about freelancers and so on who are working for agencies, working for pharma, and how does the responsibilities filter down the line? But I mean, I guess you've got examples of, I don't know, models or photographers or someone doing work and going, oh look, it's turned into this ad or something like that. You know, you can be quite a long way away from the end client and be caught up in this. You know, you can't just go, that's an ad we did and tweet it to your followers, can you?
That's right, yeah. And you can't say, you know, oh, we're now, you know, disassociated from our client. You know, you just got to always remember that you are, as a third party, you're involved in that cascade. My favorite case, I don't know if I've told you about it, Peter, before, but one that always stands in my mind, where there was an internal video made by a production company, and the actor ended up sharing it on YouTube. And because that video talked about a medicine and made claims about the medicine, that was then seen as advertising that prescription medicine to the public. So it ended up breaching the code. So that's just a real top line example there. But you've got to think about the same principles for social media as well. It's a massive hot topic, and there are loads and loads of breaches coming through. Particularly around that sharing, liking and commenting and pushing it out. And if it can be seen by, you know, the public, then you can be accused of advertising to the public there.
And do you think, where's the responsibility lie in terms of educating that supply chain, as it were? I mean, again, it might be a stupid question, but, you know, how rigorous are the pharma company clients, end clients, as it were, in monitoring what happens all the way down the supply chain, and what the education is and what the training is of all the people, agencies, freelancers, actors, whatever? What's your observation on what happens in practice about that?
Yeah, I think over the years, you know, paperwork and, you know, master service agreements and contracts between all those parties have become increasingly important. And I would expect in there, if you're, you know, doing activities or materials relating to the code, that there will be a clause in there to say that you've been trained. And I do hear from a lot of sort of third parties, agencies, that a critical part actually of the training is not only to undergo the training, but they always say, right, and will we get a certificate at the end? So I'm really aware that pharma companies are much more increasingly saying, okay, you've had the training, but can you please provide proof of the training? And that is all part of the tendering process, to make sure that they really understand this code, and that they don't go and slip up and breach the code on their behalf. Something, you know, just like social media.
Because, to put it plainly, it's the pharma company that's breached the code. It's not the actor. Yeah. Yes, so it's the pharma company who do have the responsibility and accountability. Yeah. Yes. There's a couple of questions. Let's not go too far with this. In fact, there's quite a few questions coming on this sort of thing. But for instance, Steph's asking, does it apply if a healthcare professional shares something? So if they've been involved in an activity and they share it on social media,
Okay, so if they worked on it with a pharma company, then you'd have to go back and just check that consultancy, that contracted services agreement. So if somebody just went to a pharma company meeting and off their own back, they took a photo, they posted that on social media with nothing to do with the pharma company, then they can do whatever they like. The risk point comes if they are working on behalf of the company, because they need to declare that they are, working for that company in the whole principle of transparency. And then that extra level of risk is that if somebody in the company then spots it and go, oh, thank you, Dr. Smith, for doing that, and then that pushes it out, to contacts, public healthcare professionals. So again, you then got all this extra level of promoting to the public, promoting to healthcare professionals, and of course, has it been certified, which is another key requirement as well. So, Steph, hopefully that explains that one with the breadth that you need to consider these things to be co-compliant.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, let's leave that point for a moment. There was a question in here. I've lost it now, I suppose. Oh, is there guidance? So on vaccine promotion, so a topical question from Amy here about guidance on vaccine promotion. At the moment, with so many vaccines being given emergency authorizations, what guidance on communications from pharma to public? Is there anything specific or anything with a nod to that?
Yeah, there is. So there is actually an extra section that's been added into the code to reflect this. So if you ever want to look at it, it's the new clause 11.3, and it's basically acknowledging that we now have something called temporary supply authorization of medicines. So these COVID vaccines that have not got a full marketing authorization, it's this, temporary supply. And so they're saying that for those, you can't promote them to the public unless it's part of a campaign which has been approved by health ministers, the Department of Health. So that's the second bit of legislation which has happened that has had an impact on the code since the consultation.
Okay, excellent. Okay, look, if I'm going to wrap this up from the point of view of the recording, because we're running away with time again. I guess as a final note, you would basically just repeat what you've said several times, but it's very important. Go to the code, find out what it's actually saying, and if you're looking at this video in 6 months' time, go back to the code, because these things are changing a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. This sort of session is correct here and now, but we know we're going to have changes to that technical release. So absolutely, look at the latest guidance, whether it's Q&As and things that come through. Yes.
Okay. So look, there's masses of stuff in there to think about. I'm going to draw the recording to an end and say a huge thank you, Jane, for coming online, and to the audience for coming online to us. We're all being well. Again, questions are coming straight in. All being well, these recordings are posted on Network Pharma TV, hopefully later today. So you'll catch up there. Jane, I know, is very happy to hear from anybody via LinkedIn. Is the easy way of contacting you, and we'll happily answer more questions if you want to follow up directly. But for the purposes of the recording, I'd just like to say big thank you to Jane. Thanks to the audience. And if we just give ourselves a little wave, we'll stop it now. But those of you who are watching, we're still here for the next 10 minutes, a bit longer, and we can answer some of these questions. So don't all rush away. So I'm just going to find my stop record button and bye and say goodbye. Okay, so bye, Jane. Thank you very much.